Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our April 2021 virtual Second Saturday Stars presentation. My name is Roger Moore. We have three brief presentations for you this evening. We'll start off with Mark, who will tell us about galaxy season and what's up in the night sky this time of year. And then we'll pass that on to Bill, who will give us the latest information on the Perseverance rover on Mars and the Ingenuity helicopter, which is scheduled to have first flight shortly. And then we'll finish up with Bob, who will tell us about the evolution of Galileo's garden and it's the expansion of our true pollinator garden. And at the end, there'll be some questions, but during the presentation, both Facebook and YouTube have a chat function. So feel free to leave comments or post questions. And if you are on YouTube, just take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Let me turn this over to Mark.
All right. Good evening. I am Mark Polanski, and tonight I'll be talking about galaxy season. What is galaxy season? Why and how do galaxies have a season? Does that even make sense? Sure it does. So what is a galaxy? First, we need to know what a galaxy is. This will actually advance my slides. That would be super helpful. Why don't you go to the next slide? Oh, there we go. Okay. So what is a galaxy? First, we need to know what a galaxy is. Simply put, a galaxy is a huge collection of gas, dust, and billions to trillions of stars, all held together by gravity. The gas can group together to form vast star-forming regions called nebula. And where stars form, the extra gas and dust can coalesce and become planets, orbiting the newly minted stars. The most common shapes we see are spiral galaxies, which are well structured and look sort of like flowers. They have arms, they have dust bands, and all sorts of neat features to them. Elliptical galaxies are more blob-like, with few discernible features. Sometimes they'll have some dust bands and some slight structure to them, but not nearly as much as spiral galaxies. And there's irregular galaxies, which have really odd shapes and looks like they've kind of been warped or distorted by something. Usually they're the results of colliding or interacting with other galaxies. So what is galaxy season? We know what we can see in the night sky changes with the four seasons. We have winter constellations like Orion and summer constellations like Cygnus. If you look outside over the next few weeks, you'll see the constellation Orion setting earlier and earlier every few days. Between winter and summer is, of course, spring. We call spring galaxy season because it's the best time of year to see countless numbers of distant galaxies, many of them in the constellation Leo. This time of year is the best time to see beyond our home galaxy. We're looking through the least dense parts of the Milky Way, so there's fewer stars to get in the way of seeing what's out there. Galaxies are especially neat because they're some of the most distant and massive things we can see. Galaxies contain billions to trillions of stars and countless planets, yet they're so far away they can appear as tiny dots, no bigger than a single pixel on a computer screen. This is something of a seasonal clock I came up with. Towards the center is the Earth as it revolves around the sun. Notice how the daylight side of Earth always faces the sun, but the night side faces a different direction with each season. The celestial objects around the outside are positioned roughly when they can be seen throughout the course of the year. Going counterclockwise from summer, we have the Eagle Nebula, the North American and Pelican Nebula, the Veil Nebula, the Elephant's Trunk Nebula, and the Andromeda Galaxy. As we head into winter, the Horsehead, Flame, and Orion nebulas come into prominent view. And as we head into spring, we have Spiral Galaxy, M94, the Leo Triplet, the Whirlpool Galaxy, and the Pinwheel Galaxy. Take a look at the night sky in September. The band of the summer Milky Way dominates the south and southwest sky, with a very high concentration of stars, dust, and gas extending from the galactic center. This dense river of stars follows the galactic plane up from the south and overhead into the sky. The sky in January is a little bit more benign than September, but the winter Milky Way still features prominently, with more stars and gas extending across the whole sky from southeast to northwest. Here's the same view, but in early May. There's no dense Milky Way visible here. The constellation Leo sits high in the south sky with its hidden treasure trove of galaxies. So let's dive in and take a look at a few favorites. We'll start with M101, better known as the Pinwheel Galaxy. It's visible in the northeast sky near the handle of the Big Dipper at about 9 o'clock tonight. The Pinwheel is a spiral galaxy about 170,000 light years in diameter and about 21 million light years away. It's almost double the size of our Milky Way galaxy, with roughly twice the number of stars. This is an image I took in my backyard with a 2.75-inch refractor telescope. It's cropped just to show M101 at full resolution. So let's take a look at what the full image looks like. Here's M101 in the full field of view with this camera and telescope combination. You might notice the Pinwheel isn't alone. There's several smaller, more distant galaxies visible in the same shot. How many do you think there are? Some are more obvious, some less so. It's hard to see all the small details without looking at the original full-sized image. So I went through it and I tried to circle every galaxy I could find. I picked out the more obvious ones I could see, but there's likely plenty more that I missed. And this is with a moderately low exposure time with a very small telescope. If you haven't seen the Hubble Ultra Deep Field View, I encourage you to search YouTube or Google and check it out. It turns out there's a heck of a lot of stuff up there, even in places that appear to be empty at first glance. Next up, we'll take a look at M51, the Whirlpool Galaxy. It's actually not that far away from M101 in the sky, but it's on the other side of the Big Dipper's handle. The Whirlpool Galaxy is about 76,000 light years in diameter and about 23 million light years away. It's only about 10.3% of the mass of the Milky Way, so it's a fair amount smaller. It is a spiral galaxy, but what makes it interesting is that it's interacting with a companion elliptical galaxy, known as NGC 5195. It's believed that the companion galaxy passed through the main disk of M51 about 600 million years ago, heading in the direction of Earth. And then the gravitational interactions of how they're orbiting each other pulled it back through behind M51 as recently as 50 million years ago to where it sits now. The interaction is on such a long time scale that it's almost impossible to see any movement within a human lifetime or even a few generations of human lifetimes. The results of the interactions can be seen as stars cast out and scattered from both galaxies, visible as what looks like faint wisps of powder blowing out from the main bodies, especially towards the top of the image. Like with M101, there's a few background galaxies hiding in this image. There's a nice edge-on disk at the very top, just to the left of the top galaxy, and a small blob just to the left of where the two galaxies meet. Now we'll take a look at M94, the Crocs I galaxy. Yet again, it's not far away from M101 and M51 near the handle of the Big Dipper in the eastern sky at this time of night. The Crocs eye sits about 16 million light years from Earth and features a bright barred inner ring about 5,400 light years in diameter, making it a barred spiral galaxy. The outer arms extend out to about 45,000 light years. This galaxy is odd in that it seems to defy our current understanding of how galaxies form. There's a certain amount of mass required for a galaxy to exist, to have enough gravity to hold itself together. In most galaxies, the visible light emitted doesn't account for all the mass needed to hold itself together. So we think dark matter makes up the balance. A study done in 2008 reported that the visible or luminous matter in M94 seems to account for enough mass to hold itself together, meaning no dark matter was necessary. It's a controversial result, and it likely requires further study to figure out how this galaxy can exist. Next, we'll take a look at the Leo Triplet, which are 3 galaxies in one convenient field of view. First, it's found in the constellation Leo in the southeast sky around 9 o'clock tonight. This is a neat collection of 3 interacting galaxies, roughly the same distance from Earth at about 35 million light years away. At the top is NGC 3628, which kind of looks like a hamburger wedged between 2 buns, so it's called the Hamburger Galaxy. M65 sits towards the bottom right, and M66 is at the bottom. The galaxies are close enough where the gravity of each affects the others. We think the Hamburger Galaxy is a barred spiral galaxy, but it's hard to tell for sure because we're looking at it edge on, like looking at a pizza from the side, where all you see is the crust. M66 has become irregular, with one of the arms warping, likely because of an interaction with M65 at some point in the past. And M65 is more of an elliptical galaxy, with relatively few dust lanes or features visible. The last galaxy we'll look at is Andromeda, our nearest neighbor galaxy. It's a fair amount larger than the Milky Way, comparable in size to the Whirlpool Galaxy we saw earlier. It's also heading right for us, with a collision set to begin in a few billion years. Don't worry, even if we're still around in a few billion years, the odds of any stars actually hitting each other in a galactic merger are very small. Galaxies are so huge, despite looking like solid objects from a distance, they're actually quite sparse, and the stars are fairly spaced out. The closest neighbor star to Earth is Proxima Centauri, about 4.2 light years away. For a sense of scale, Pluto, the farthest former planet in the solar system, is a mere 0.000628 light years from Earth. To quote Douglas Adams, space is big, really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. Galaxies are always fun to see, and not just because they look neat. It's more about what they represent. Every star you've ever seen in the night sky with your eyes or through a telescope is part of just our Milky Way galaxy. Seeing galaxies outside the Milky Way can show us how vast the universe really is. Going back to this M101 image, every one of those red circles indicates billions to trillions of stars within these other galaxies. And that's just through one tiny telescope. Each of those stars represents another potential solar system. We've only begun to scratch the surface of exoplanets for discovering planets around other stars within our own galaxy, let alone the potentially hundreds of billions of other galaxies out there. Every time we build a bigger telescope, we see deeper and deeper into the universe and keep finding out more and more out there. So who knows what we'll find next? Thank you, and I will pass it on to Bill.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening. My name is Bill Cloutier, and tonight we're going back to Mars. But before we get started, just a quick review of all things Mars. The Martian day is called a sol. It's almost 40 minutes longer than an Earth day, which comes into play later on with communications. Also coming into play is Mars distance. Currently, it's about 151 million miles from Earth, or 15.5 light minutes. So if you were trying to carry on a casual conversation with somebody on Mars, it would take 15.5 minutes for your message to reach Mars and a minimum of 15.5 minutes for you to get an answer back. So as you can see, doing things in real time on Mars isn't very practical. It's also springtime at the Mars 2020 landing site, so that will come into play too as far as the temperature and the environmental factors. So tonight, we're going to talk about a technology demonstration. If you've tuned in to this program the last couple of months, we've talked about the Perseverance rover. Well, on that rover was a small demonstration project called the Ingenuity helicopter. And for the next few weeks, the rover is going to be a spectator. It's going to be watching this technology demonstration. And if it's successful, we're going to see the first aircraft to fly on Mars. Just for some perspective, it's been a little over 100 years, 118 years since first flight on Earth, at least the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk, and about 82 years since Sikorsky demonstrated the first practical helicopter. That was in Stratford, Connecticut. So it hasn't been that long since we've been initiating flight on Earth, and here you get to witness first flight on another planet. So, Ingenuity. It's a pretty tiny helicopter. It only weighs about 4 pounds. It's self-contained, so it's able to communicate with the rover. Then the rover passes on that information to Earth. It was developed to fly in the Martian atmosphere. And if you recall, the atmosphere on Mars is extremely thin, only about 1% of the atmosphere at sea level on Earth. So we're talking about a lot of challenges. It has counter-rotating blades, and they spin about 5 to 6 times faster than a conventional helicopter blade on Earth. Again, that's due to the very thin atmosphere on Mars. So it took 7 years. We weren't even sure that this demonstration would be included on the Mars 2020 mission. It was a concept. They did some preliminary investigation to see if it was even possible to fly on Mars. And with each test, they came back and said, well, it looks good. And they continued to develop the prototype. And eventually they got the go to include it on the mission. So if you remember some of the pictures we had shown of the rover, here's the rover tucked up inside the back shell of the Mars 2020 spacecraft. You can see that the rover wheels are currently, they were covered with some kind of protective material. The rocket nozzles are covered, but that red circle shows you the Ingenuity helicopter all folded up like a piece of origami. And it was bolted to the bottom of the rover, and then a debris shield was added to protect the helicopter during landing from any dust that would be kicked up. So about 2 weeks ago, the debris shield was released. You can see that on the left, dropped to the ground, exposing the helicopter to Mars for the first time. The actual deployment, which you can see beginning on the right, took about 6 days. There were explosive bolts and winches and gears. It went through a very methodical unfolding process to lower it to the ground. You can see its legs starting to be deployed. And the picture on the right is still hanging from the rover, but it's fully deployed, all 4 legs. So the reason they kept it hanging there until it was checked out is because at this point, the rover is providing power to the helicopter. The helicopter needs power to survive, particularly to survive at night. So the rover is providing power to the heaters on the helicopter to keep the electronics warm, because the Martian nights get cold enough that they can actually crack and ruin electronics. So you have to keep the heaters on. And the helicopter has a very small self-contained power source, but not as strong or as capable as the rover. So they kept it there until the helicopter was checked out. Once it was checked out, they allowed the helicopter to drop the final 3 or 4 inches to the ground. So you can see there, the technicians are working on the helicopter on Earth, and there's a solar panel on the very top. That's the way that the helicopter gets its power. That solar panel charges 6 small batteries. And of course, it needs the sun to do so. And you have to remember, Mars is quite a bit further away than the Earth is. So the solar energy reaching the surface of Mars is less than half of the energy you would get on Earth. So just last Saturday, the helicopter was released. It dropped to the ground, and then the rover quickly drove away some distance. And that was to allow the sun to fall upon the solar panel and start recharging the helicopter's batteries. And since that time, they've been doing incremental tests, checking out the systems, releasing the rotors so they could spin freely. And just in the past day or so, they did the final test, which was to spin up the blades to about 2,400 RPM. There was a glitch. They believe it was software and not hardware related. So they're going to go back and relook at the data and fly in a few days. But since the Perseverance rover is a very valuable piece of equipment, the rover is going to move away and monitor the test from a distance. So since they landed on Mars, the engineers at JPL have been looking for a good place to test the rover, not the rover, I'm sorry, the helicopter. They wanted a nice flat location, free from any large boulders. So they mapped out an area where the tests could be performed, not too far from the landing location. And they marked off an airfield and a flight zone where they will conduct the tests of the helicopter. The rover is going to move about 200 feet away from the test zone, a very small overlook. It's about 3 feet higher, but it's enough, I guess, to get a good vantage point. The rover will be filming the tests, and if successful, we're going to get hopefully some nice movies from the rover. This is a 30-day window. All the tests have to be complete within 30 days. At that point, they're going to declare the demonstration over, and the rover is going to get on with its primary mission. So, as of a few hours ago, the test flight window opens no later than Wednesday. The tests will occur in the middle of the Martian day, and that's a very deliberate time, because if they do it too early in the morning, the batteries are not going to be fully charged. And if they do it too late in the day and they run down the batteries won't be able to provide enough energy to the heaters to keep the helicopter warm at night. So there's a very small window in the middle of the Martian day. The first flight has some very simple goals. They're going to climb up to about an altitude of about 10 feet. They're going to hover, and they're going to come back down again. And that's going to be the first flight. It won't last more than 20 or 30 seconds. And they're going to be able to get a lot of data from that flight to see if they met their goals and whether they will continue on with the flight testing. The one unknown they really can't model is how much wind we're going to have. We could get 10 to 20 mile an hour wind. And when you have a 4-pound package, it could really blow that helicopter off course. So they're very conscious. They're doing a very incremental assessment. So the first test, just a few feet above the ground, come back down. The rover will film it. The helicopter has 2 cameras. One's a navigation camera, but the other camera is a color camera. And we hope to get some images from that camera of its first flight. They've already met a lot of their scientific goals already, even without flying. The rover, of course, was able to deploy the helicopter. The helicopter was able to survive the Martian nights, which gets down to a negative 130 degrees below zero. It's been able to communicate with the rover. So a lot of things have been checked off the list. And now it's time to fly. So as long as they can get that software glitch resolved, hopefully by Wednesday, we will be in the air. And then what they're doing is they're doing a 3-day block. So they will fly one day, and then they'll start to download the data from that flight over the next 2 days, including any images. They'll reassess, and then they'll decide whether to go for another flight. So again, it's going to be incremental. Each test flight will go further, climb higher, and last longer. So we're hoping that we will get 4, 5, even more flights within the 30-day window. When the Apollo 11 astronauts went to the moon, they carried with them a small splinter of wood and a small swatch of fabric from the Wright Flyer, first successful flight down at Kitty Hawk. This time around, a small piece of that Flyer's wing, that fabric from that wing, has been attached to the helicopter. So we're carrying on that tradition. First flight on Earth, first flight on Mars. This is a selfie that the rover took as it was moving away from the helicopter. So you can see the helicopter there on the surface of Mars. The rover took this picture with one of its cameras on its robotic arm. Again, as of a few hours ago, NASA has said we're not going to fly any earlier than Wednesday. It'll be midday on Mars, so there'll be a lag between when the flight takes place, when we get the data coming down to Earth. So it could be the middle of the night by the time we find out that it was successful or not. So why are we doing this? Well, if this is successful, helicopters could play a critical role in future exploration of Mars. They can go places that astronauts or rovers can't go. They can go places that are inherently dangerous. So their ability to scout out interesting places could really add value to future missions. Unfortunately, the thin atmosphere is going to limit the size of these helicopters. We're not going to make large helicopters. They're maybe twice the size, twice the payload of what Ingenuity is, but there's limitations based upon Mars being Mars. So we will continue to update you as we go along and as NASA develops this particular demonstration. Hopefully we'll have some good news for you next month. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Bob Lambert, and he will take you back to Earth.
Thank you, Bill. This is all amazing. Bill and I are part of the original 1998 Corps of Volunteers, the observatory, and we lived through the anxieties of the years leading up to the Apollo program. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought I would live to see a helicopter taking off on Mars. That would have been way beyond my imagination. So it is a great job, Bill. So I promised that I would take you back to Earth, and we were kind of shut down, and still are, over the COVID. But this team, being a very results-oriented team, decided we had to do the things that we could do and not be burdened by actually running the observatory, which takes most of our time. So we worked on two things. One is the meteor tracking system that we've been building, inventing the camera systems and integrating software and working with the Westport Astronomical Society. That's making good headway. But back in our backyard, we got deeply involved in a new project in the gardens. So is my screen shared?
No, not yet, Bob.
Oh, what do I have to do? My coach is helping me here. Thank you, Marty.
There we go.
Are you seeing the whole screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the other thing we did was to work on an experimental garden on the north side of the building and the west side of the building to complement Galileo's garden. And so this project has done well, and we are focused this year on making a Galileo's garden into a true native pollinator garden that will surround the observatory. So we all know about the serious decline in habitat for birds, bees, and butterflies, which are vital to all of the Earth's food chain, especially our food chain. So it's important that everybody take actions they can to work on the habitat. So the McCarthy Observatory team in the spring of last year endeavored to do an experimental native pollinator garden on the observatory grounds. And we have a talented master gardener team, and a lot of folks from 7 towns worked on this. It's been a real success. We're marching on to transform the whole garden this year. So the garden started when we were celebrating the 400th anniversary of Galileo's first telescope, the Worldwide Year of Astronomy. And so this was part of what we did. And we built this garden, and it's turned out to be a pretty amazing thing. These are all pictures taken in the last couple of years, and you can see it's very, very rich in and colorful from throughout the whole growing year. So it was designed to be an outdoor classroom, and it's a professionally designed garden. It has many perennial flowering plants, annuals planted from seed or purchased, tall arborvitae, I mean really tall arborvitae now, that wall us in from the warehouses and dumpsters next door, tall grasses that are fabulous to watch in the wind, giant granite benches, and a huge sundial that we designed. It took 2 years to design it and a year to build it. It's a fabulous clock. Keeps accurate time. Countless flowers from March to early November. We really do have a kaleidoscope in this garden from early spring to the first serious frost. But eventually, as we were doing this, we began following the right sustainability rules for not using harmful herbicides, pesticides, etc. We even started using a hand mower to mow so we wouldn't put any carbon in the atmosphere from a gas-fueled power mower. That's good exercise too, by the way. I enjoy it. So the garden, we did better as we gained experience. We just kept building knowledge and doing better, moving things around. So every year we had a big workload. But in the last 10 years, the knowledge, the serious decline of habitat started becoming known. And some of the reasons why the habitat, besides just too many people and too many farms, there were other things going on. So species of birds, bees, and butterflies have been in rapid decline. Viable habitat for them has been seriously repurposed for human use and abuse, unfortunately. So we noticed this decline. It was pretty evident over 10 years as we put in more things that should attract bees and birds and butterflies. We were starting to see fewer. So what was wrong? And this has been a trend in the whole area. Monarchs in particular are tracked by many resources, and many gardens report having no monarchs in recent years. We've had a few, but they come later, and we enjoy them, but it's a pretty small crop. So we didn't know why, but then we found out through watching the science and listening to speakers on YouTube, we had a breakthrough. The garden did not have enough true pollinator plants of New England heritage. This is the important thought here, that the plants have to be native New England heritage things. And it's not a hugely long list. So the science of the need for native plants did not exist a decade ago. If you went to a nursery and asked for, I want native plants, you'd get kind of a blank look. But the food chain that supports native birds, bees, and butterflies is a very, very complex one. It is a full native ecosystem. And if you stray from that native ecosystem, guess what results you get? Poor. So our garden was designed for a mix of beauty and supporting pollinators, but it was done without the knowledge of a decade, with the knowledge of a decade ago, which was sadly lacking. Through nobody's fault, they just not enough science had been focused on it. So new news came to us in early 2020. The ecosystem has to be native and diverse if you want success with this food chain. It was pretty shocking to our team. We really, for the most part, didn't have a clue. But it can be fixed. So we decided we're going to take action. We had nothing else to do. We have to wear masks and social distance and not do much else. So we dove in with both feet. We built a true native pollinator meadow, an experiment to teach us and guide us. We followed all the rules of native. We purchased 150 true native perennials, New England pollinator perennials, and they were all in very good health when we bought them. And we augmented with annuals grown by our team with native heritage seeds, which I didn't know existed, but we grew native heritage plants from those seeds, and lo and behold, they worked. So we built a water feature. You can't have a pollinator garden without a water feature. So we built one out of 2 of these remaining giant granite concave discs that were sitting behind the observatory. By midsummer, we had many successes with varieties of bees and butterflies. Capped off with, we had 4 female and 1 male monarch that hung around, and We don't know that day to day they were the same 4, but when we counted, we usually ended up with 4. So, and I don't think any more than the 5. And we learn how to tell the difference between a male and a female, which is kind of cool. So here we built from scratch a certified pollinator meadow in 5 months. That's pretty good. So we started over here in April. We hand dug up all the horrible grubby lawn that was there. We hand dug it all, the sod, and had it hauled away in mid to late April. In late May, we did soil testing, etc. We did some augmentation. Then May 28th, we had 8 yards of good topsoil brought in, and we spread that. Then on June 6th, this is we talked to a tree guy who had a big giant crane system into hauling these 4 huge discs that weigh between 1,500 and 2,000 pounds to put them in place for both a bench and the water feature. Then in late June, we started putting in the hardscape. We've got this nice bluestone walkway and the soil augmented and packed down. And then the next week we started putting in the plants. We got all the plants, the 150 plants. We drove up to northern Massachusetts and got the plants, and we started planting them in late June. So by July 24th, we'd put in the entire watering system, which is a pretty complex maze underneath here, and put in, I think, 8 yards of sweet peat, which we use as compost and ground cover. And we started having plants growing very, very well. So September 25th, it was a garden that was really working. We were getting lots of bees, pollinating bees, and the first butterflies. So that's from April 20th to September 25th, 5 months. We were done. And it stayed very healthy through Halloween, most of the big plants, these giant tithonia, 7 feet tall. They were amazing. They were just covered with pollinators. And they stayed around till the first real frost. So we had success and we learned. We had 100% success rate with all the healthy specimens we bought. So it takes 3 years for perennials to actually be in full size and full flower. So we're done with year 1. The next 2 years, these plants will be mature, sporting many of the flowers needed for pollinator success. But we did have some really nice successes, and we took a lot of cool photographs. And it actually helped the rest of the garden as well. It was better wind protected, so the butterflies would come over to the north garden that was better wind protected. And so it started working the other garden as well. So by year end, we decided we needed to rethink Galileo's garden because we knew what things we had to do. A large portion of the existing garden does not have native plants. Some of the plants we had were of unknown origin, even though varieties of plant. The variety of plant is one that's native to our region, but that doesn't mean that the nursery bought them from our region. They could buy lupins from Missouri or Texas, and it looks the same to you, but the insects won't eat them. So native really means native. That was the biggest lesson. So we decided it was time to replan and replant, and that's what we're about now. So 2021 is dedicated to the rebirth of Galileo's garden. We analyzed the garden plantings, and some are being totally removed. In fact, we've been pulling out a fair number of things. All the grasses are gone, and a number of other things are on the list of being replaced. Many new varieties of plants from trusted New England nurseries will be planted. The good news is that a lot of the nurseries are now aware of this and are starting to stock and merchandise their New England native pollinators. So the good news is that they're aware and we can buy them. The bad news is they're in such demand and limited supply, they're getting very expensive. So we'll come back to that point. So seeds harvested from our meadow plants will be grown at home. A lot of the master gardeners took a lot of them home. And so we'll be able to take the seeds from last year and plant, and also package them up and give them to interested gardeners. So if there's people listening here who are interested in getting some of these seeds, we can help you. We will supply a mixture of them. And there's going to be less grass. We're taking over some more garden. Grass is bad. Grass is like the Gobi Desert to pollinating the insects that feed the pollinators. So it's useless in the food chain. I didn't know that. So then we're going to get a couple of flowering trees and a wider variety of food chain plants. So we've begun. We're chopping and shopping. We're now redoing plot borders and work pathway. We did a lot of that this week. Roger can attest to that. He was one of the assigned diggers. We have an overall plan. We're making frequent revisions, as we should be. So we're looking at the budget, and they've kicked off a fundraising program. So true native plants are at a premium. So there's a challenge to what is affordable. But there's an organization called Sustainable Connecticut, which is working across the state, and it's pretty well funded. And they have a team in New Milford that's working on sustainable parts of the infrastructure of the town, and pollinator gardens are high on their list. The habitats are high on their list, and these pollinator gardens are at the top of that pyramid. So they came to us basically and heard what we were doing through the mayor, and they will match donated funds to us dollar for dollar, which is a pretty good deal. I've never had that deal. So here's our fundraising project to meet the budget for what we want to do. We've figured out the $6,000 would really be adequate. So 50% donor contribution, 50% sustainable Connecticut matching, and achieving this goal will enable us to do things on a faster and larger scale. We can buy larger plants. You know that perennial specimens, the price goes up geometrically as the size of the specimens grows. So we're going to get better equipment, flowering trees, etc. But this will also help us get experience, a jump start to start teaching and sharing. The real objective is to have a local native pollinator teaching garden for students, parents, fellow gardeners, any community people who are interested. And we hope to help spread the word. So to donate, this is a crowd granting funding system. That's a term I hadn't heard till I got hooked up with Sustainable Connecticut. So to learn more about our project and how to donate online, the website is patronicity.com/McCarthy pollinators. patronicity.com/McCarthy pollinators. On that, you get to our site, and there's very good information about our project and links for donating and or working the garden as it's transformed. Or if you don't want to go there, to this company who does this, what their business model is, they are crowdfunding for nonprofits. It's their only business. So they're used widely by nonprofits. Or you can mail checks to Post Office Box 1144 in New Milford. So the focus is on getting as many people as possible. That's kind of the philosophy of crowdfunding. Get as many people as possible to donate small amounts of money. So any size donation is welcome. We just reached our $1,000. We opened up for business a couple days before Easter, and we've just reached the $1,000 level in donations. So, but we would appreciate small donations from as many people as possible. It's a pretty good investment, especially with the matching and the fact that we get deep discounts and no tax at almost all the nurseries in the area. So the pollinators need us to come to their rescue. So we're hoping you can help out. Okay, now somehow I hand this back to Roger.
Yes, you need to stop sharing your screen, Bob, please.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
We do have one question from Larry. Larry's asking, did the garden attract hummingbirds?
Yes, we had 4. Well, it did, but we helped them because we had a hummingbird feeder up right at the edge of that garden. And there was 1 male and there were 4 females. And those females fought like crazy all day long for drinking rights on that feeder. It was a riot to watch it. I'm having trouble with the with how I pass it back to you, Roger. I'm doing something wrong. Oh, Martha, dear.
We gotta be able to see. Well,
Right.
just close. Now, green.
There we go.
Sorry. They don't let me talk very often.
So that was it. Time for questions, if there are any more. We'll take a couple of minutes. That was all 3 of those presentations were excellent. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Any further questions? We'll take a couple of minutes to wait for some more to come in. So the next edition will be of Second Saturday will be May the 8th, and again at 8 p.m.
Not seeing any questions so far, but we'll give it another minute or so.
Yeah, give it a couple of minutes.
We are on about a 30-second delay from when we speak to when it goes out to YouTube and Facebook. So there's a little bit of a delay there. All right. Doesn't look like we have any other questions.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And please stay safe and healthy. And we will see you next month for the May